Hi guys, this is Sukesh. Uh, I will take today's session, and today's session is basically focused on basic concept of J2EE. Today's session agenda is uh, what is a Java platform and different Java editions, what is an enterprise application, what is Java Enterprise Edition, uh, describe web application technologies, and identify the advantages and disadvantages of each application technology. So we will start with a Java platform. What basically Java platform is, so I'm going to explain it first. Java platform is a name for a bundle of related programs from Sun that allow for developing and running programs written in Java programming language. Keeping in mind to a target hardware, we choose a different Java editions. If my target hardware is a mobile or a PDA, I will go for a micro edition, that is a J2ME. And if my target hardware is a desktop, so I will choose simple Java standard edition, which is a core Java. Then we have a enterprise edition. This enterprise edition I will choose at that time whenever my target hardware is high-end server, or whenever I want to create an application which are web applications. Another option I have is for fourth edition, that is Java card. This edition we use for applications, especially applets, to run on smart cards. So what is an enterprise application? Enterprise application is a term used to describe application or a software that a business would use to assist the organization in solving enterprise problem. It's very hard to define precisely what is an enterprise application. What we would like to know about enterprise application by using or by knowing the characteristics of enterprise application. So the first characteristic is enterprise applications are large in size. So here large in size mean to say is they are divided into different modules. So large in size does not mean that they are big in size. Another is a distributed. Enterprise applications are distributed because the different parts of an application are divided into different computers. Maybe they will run on network. So let's say, for example, my business logic is in one computer, my presentation logic is in one computer, and my database logic is in one computer. So that's why enterprise applications are distributed. Basically, we use a N-tier architecture in our enterprise application. Then enterprise applications are highly secure. Reason being is it's not easy to access any part of the application directly if you are not authorized user. So for every user, the role is clearly defined who can access which part of the application. Another part here is enterprise applications are highly scalable. So highly scalable here, it means to say is to increase the capacity of the application, means to increase the ability of the application. Let's say, for example, I'm giving one example of banking domain. My application right now is going to be used in maybe 20 branches of the bank, and maybe in the future the branches are going to increase, and maybe the number of users are also going to increase. So in such a case, enterprise applications are efficient because we can increase the ability of the application. Then they are highly available. Highly available here it means to say is enterprise applications are accessible 24/7, and there are very less chances to for the failure. And another thing is, maybe the failure of one component, it doesn't mean that the whole application will fail or stop working. The last point here is enterprise applications we can access through different channel. Let's say for example one person is trying to access one application from a desktop computer, okay, and maybe another person is trying to access the same application through web by using an internet, and maybe someone else is using his mobile phone and he is trying to access the same application. So it meaning to say is enterprise application I can access from different channels. Next part here is what makes the enterprise application. As I said, we use a n-tier architectures, and we have a different layers. We have a presentation logic, we have a business logic, we have a data access logic, and we have a system services. So in this place I will explain in detail about Java Enterprise Edition. Basically Java Enterprise Edition is built on a foundation of Java Platform Standard Edition. J2EE is an open and standard based platform for developing, deploying and managing n-tier web enabled, server centric and component based enterprise application. And typically they will be a server based application focusing on serving the need of lots of users at one time. And the J2EE platform consists of a set of services, APIs and protocols that provide the functionality for developing multi-tier web-based application. So in my simple words I can say is, whenever I want to make a web applications, I want to use server and client, or I want to create a component based application, I will go for J2EE. This is a architecture of J2EE. We have a client tier, we have a web tier, and we have a business tier, and the last one is we have an enterprise information tier. So as you can see in the picture, in the client tier we have an applet, we have a web browser and maybe other devices like mobile phone, or I can use a Java application. And in my web tier we have a JSP, we have a Servlet, we have a JSF, and we have a web services. Business tier is responsible for business logic, and we use a Java beans here. So different type of Java beans are here, like session bean, entity bean, and message bean. The last tier is for my database. Okay, so as you can see in my web tier we have a web container, and in our business tier we have a EJB container. What is a web container and what is an EJB container, you will learn in the later classes. All these are the elements of J2EE, some APIs and technologies which makes a J2EE. Like we have a Java Servlet, Java Server Pages, Java Server Pages, RMI, GPA, JMS, JNDI, GTA and EJB, and we have XML web services. All these technologies we will cover in this topic, J2EE. So before we start J2EE, one person must have a knowledge of what is a request and response model. Basically in this case we have one client, and client will send an HTTP request to the server, and server will send back a response to the client. Now if I have a web server over here, most of the time when a user send a HTTP request, the response which I will get from my server is static by nature. So I'm going to explain here now why we need a Servlet or why we need a JSP. As you can see here, we have a server, and a web server application whenever I use, you can see they are, as I said, the result is, the output is static by nature. But sometimes I want to make an application in which I want to get a dynamic response. So in such a case, I need someone who can help me to get a dynamic response from my server. So this is the place where a Java Servlet or JSP came in the picture. One more thing I would like to explain here. Whenever I am making a site which is static by nature, so I will say it is a website, and whenever I am going to make one web which is dynamic by nature, so I have to use I will say this is a web application and I have to use a application server. We have two types of server. One is like a web server and one is like an application server. When I'm saying web server, most of the time they are like the server which have only one tier, like one container. As you can see in J2EE, we have two different type of container. Here I show you here this place in this Java E architecture. We have two different container. One is web container and one is EJB container. So in such a case, I have to use an application server, and in the web server there is only one thing, which is a web container. So the common web application technologies are the CGI, Java Servlet, JSP, and Java Server Faces. The first I will explain something about CGI. CGI is a technology used to build web applications. How CGI programs run, so here I'm going to explain. First, a client sends a request to the server, and the server launches the CGI program in a separate operating system which is called cell. It meaning to say is, whenever one client send a request to the web server, my web server will create a cell for particular request. Cell is nothing, just like an operating system inside the web server. So the CGI program process the data and send the response to the client as HTML. It meaning to say is, when web server will send the response to the client, that is in form of HTML. What are the advantages of CGI? First is, they can be written in various languages such as Perl, and they do not crash a server if there are bugs in the program. It meaning to say is, maybe sometimes one component of the application is not working, so it doesn't mean that whole application will not work, just because each and every request, as I said, will go to a different cell. So the last is, they do not cause the concurrency conflict, because for every request there is one particular cell, so there is no chance of concurrency conflict in my CGI program. The disadvantages for my CGI programs are, response time is very high, just because, as I said, for every request web server need to create one cell, and it always take a time, so my response time will be high. Second thing is, they are not scalable. What is the reason? Because due to the limited number of OS cells, due to limited resource, due to limited hardware. So because as the number of requests will increase, the OS cell will increase. So it means to say is, the limitation is there, the request limitation is there in a CGI program. Then CGI programs are often platform dependent, so it means CGI programs you cannot run on every platform. Another drawback is CGI programs are not object oriented, and there is no separation for business logic and presentation logic. Both are at the same place, which makes complex to understand and complex to debug the program. This is how one CGI program runs, and the workload on server comes whenever CGI program runs. As you can see in the screen here, when a client sends a request, server will create one CGI cell and the workload on the server will increase. Now here you can see, as the number of requests increased, the workload on server also increased because of the different CGI cell for every request. So now I'm coming to my Java Servlet. Basically, a Java Servlet is a program that runs on a server. These servlets are dynamic by nature and they handle HTTP request. A servlet is similar to a CGI program but execute inside a web container as a thread. It meaning to say is, whenever a client will send a request to the web server will transfer this request to the web container, and the web container will create one thread for one request, and then that thread will try to find out the servlet in the repository, and if he found the servlet, he will activate that servlet, and then he will give the response to the client. So I'm going to explain what is a web container. The web container is a Java platform machine that supplies an implementation of Java Servlet API. In my simple words, I will say web container is an servlet engine who will look the servlet in the repository, and if he found the servlet, he will activate that servlet to give the response. And all Java servlet must exist in Java container. So it means to say is each and every servlet must be inside the web container, because all servlet runs inside the web container. The web container activates the servlet that match to the request, as I said. This is a picture from where you will get an idea how servlets execute in my this web server. As you can see here, one client will send a request to a web server. This request is an HTTP request, and it will go to a web container, and web container will create one thread. Okay, and when he will create one thread, so he will try to look up the servlet and it will give the response back to the client. But here you need to understand one more thing. When web container send a request to the web server send a request to the this web container, that request was HTTP request. But here a web container, here he is creating one request object, because Java is based on object. So here request is one object and response is also one object. This is the execution of the Java servlet. The steps are: the client send a request to a server, the web container running inside the server receive the request, the web container create a new thread to process the request, the web container forward the request to the servlet, the web container execute the servlet. So now you will find the workload on the web server whenever I'm using a servlet. As you can see here, one client send a request, web container create one thread, and then he is looking for a servlet. And now you can see the workload on my web server. So you can see now, as the number of requests increase, web container created a number of threads for each request, and the workload on my processor remained the same. So this is one of the biggest advantages of Java Servlet. The performance wise, they are much better than CJA programs. So the advantages for Java Servlets are they are efficient, they are secure, they are scalable, and they are platform independent. And the disadvantages for Java Servlets are they do not separate presentation and business logic. This is one of the biggest drawback in a Java Servlet, because maybe sometimes a person who is a good web designer is maybe don't have a knowledge of Java. So it means one who is a web designer and who don't have a knowledge of Java cannot work on Servlet. So this is one drawback. Second thing is they need to handle the concurrency conflict. As I said, the number of requests increased, so for every request there is one thread. So it means to say is there are a multi-threads, and multi-threads always have a one problem, that is a race condition. So all threads try to finish their job, so this create a concurrency conflict. Here is a life cycle of my servlet. Whenever my servlet begin, it begin from a function whose name is initialize init. This will come only once in the life cycle of a servlet. Then we have a service method in our servlet, which will handle the client request and give the response to the client. And last one is destroy. Whenever my servlet finished his job, the destroy function will call and the servlet will destroy. So init method and destroy method will come only once in the life cycle of the servlet, whereas service will come again and again. So I'm going to explain here how to make a simple servlet program. I'm going to use a ID, that is NetWin ID. So I'm giving a demo how to make one application in which I will use a Java Servlet. So I will choose a Java Web from here. Then I will choose a web application. I will give a name to my application. From this place you have to choose your application server name. So I'm going to use Apache Tomcat, and at this place you have to choose a Java E version. So right now I'm using Java E6, and from here I will say finish. By default your NetWin ID will create one JSP file for you to start the program. So I want to use a servlet, so I will delete this file from my computer and I will create a servlet in this application. So I have to give the name to my servlet. I'm giving the name is first servlet over here. If you want to give a name of your package, you can give the package name. I'm giving the name is my pack. So this place you will see this is the class name, my pack dot first servlet. My pack is name of my package. Servlet name, this is the name you can give according to your choice. My class name will remain same, and I can change the sublet name from here. If I don't want to change, it's okay, you can say finish here, but if you want to change, you can give a name from this place. So now your class name is first sublet, and the sublet name you are using over here is first sublet demo. And this is the URL pattern. It means whenever you will run your sublet in your application server, you have to give the name. So let's say I want to change this, and I'm giving the name is first sublet demo. One more thing, in your application you need a deployment descriptor file, that is web.xml. So web.xml file is a file who have information of my application, my configuration, and all classes which I'm going to use in my application. And it is also used to map my sublet with URL pattern. So I have to say initially, when there is no web.xml, I have to click this one over here. So my web.xml file will come at this place, web.xml, and you can see this place. It is basically a deployment descriptor file, and my application server will get the information from this file. So like classes, like configuration, so all these information I will get from here. So my sublet name is first sublet demo, my class name is first sublet, okay, and now here you can see my sublet is mapped with my class. So the name which I gave here, first sublet demo, is coming over here, okay, and this is the URL pattern, okay. So one more thing you have to do is, whenever you want to run your application, you have to give the starting page name. So from this place you have to give the name of the sublet. So my sublet name is first sublet demo, so this you will find from here. Now I'm coming to my sublet. This is my first sublet program. These are the packages which I need to include in my sublet program. Java.io, I am going to use a class whose name is IOException and printWriter, and some other classes for sublet. I'm not going to explain this too much in this this class. Just for a simple example, I will just try to run this program on my application server. So as you can see over here, the sublet is running on my server, application server. Anything I want to do here, I have to So here you can see that I just try to add one object of date class, and I want to display it on my sublet. One thing here, you noticed that whenever I want to add HTML inside my sublet, I have to write that inside the out.println. This is one of the biggest drawback I found in sublet, because whenever I have to embed HTML, means whenever I have to use HTML in my sublet, I have to write that inside the out.println. This make my program complex. So if someone is not a Java developer, it's very hard for that person to write a sublet program. Second part here is about a Java server pages. We call it JSP. JSP is a server-side programming technology that is used to generate dynamic web pages. The JSP technology facilitates the segregation of work profile of web designer and a web developer. A web designer can design and formulate the layout for a web page by using an HTML, whereas a web developer working independently can use Java code and other JSP specific tag to code the business logic. So here it is very clear. Someone who is a web designer, he will work on HTML part, and someone who is a web developer, he will work on the Java code. Advantages for my JSP technologies: it provides a high performance and scalability. It is built on Java technology and is therefore a platform independent, and it takes advantages of Java and its application programming interface. It meaning to say is, basically, if I will say in simple words, a JSP is an HTML page, but I include the Java inside that web page. And as you know that Java is a programming language which is platform independent, and I can use that anywhere. The disadvantages for JSP technologies: first is it is hard to debug, and second is a concurrency issue. As I said earlier, that in the sublet have a concurrency issue. Same things comes here, because whenever I create one JSP page, whenever I want to run that page, that JSP page first must translate into a sublet. So basically JSP page is also a sublet. As you can see in this picture, whenever I create one JSP page, that JSP page first translate, okay, and it becomes a sublet, become a Java file, and then we use a Java compiler to make a class file, and then it will execute. So basically JSP file is also a sublet. So I'm going to explain the difference between sublet and JSP. They both handle the dynamic data. This is not a difference, but the difference are sublet handle a business logic, whereas JSP handles a presentation logic. Sublet is HTML within Java, whereas JSP is Java within HTML, and sublets are created and maintained by Java programmer, whereas if I say JSP created and maintained by a web designer. Let's look at the small demo for my JSP. The same application I will choose here. I will say new, and I will add a JSP page. You have to give the name of the JSP page, any name you can give. So here is my new JSP page. As I said, JSP is basically an HTML page, but I can add a Java inside that. So first I will try to run a simple JSP page. So to run this simple JSP page, what I have to do is I have to go to my web.xml file, and I have to give the starting page name is my new JSP.jsp file. So this hello world message is coming from this JSP file. So let's say, for example, if I want to use something inside my JSP page which is a part of Java, so here you can see message is coming here. So this is end of the session. If you have any query, please you can ask me a question.
Unmuted. The organizer has